My father looked at me across a table covered in cracked lobster shells and empty champagne flutes, folded his hands the way he does before he says something he's rehearsed, and smiled. "You're paying, right? You've always been good for it." 19 people heard him say that. I was about to make sure a 20th did too, a man named David whose job title, that night, mattered more than anyone at that table understood. Welcome back to Hush Life Stories, where ordinary people get cornered by the people who are supposed to love them and find their way out without losing themselves in the process. If you've ever been the one who's expected to fix it, cover it, and smile while you do, stay with me. Drop a comment when you get to the part with the second card. You'll know it when you see it. And subscribe because this family isn't done yet. But let me take you back 3 weeks to a Tuesday morning that started like every other Tuesday morning, because that's the thing about the moment your life changes. It never announces itself. My name is Marissa. I'm 34, and I investigate insurance claims for a living. Specifically, I work special investigations for a regional health and property insurer, which is a polite way of saying I get paid to find the exact spot where somebody's story stops matching their numbers. A contractor claims a roof collapsed in a storm that never happened. A clinic bills for 40 physical therapy sessions a patient never attended. A small business owner reports a break-in 3 days before his lease was set to expire. People lie in patterns. That's the first thing you learn in this job. Nobody invents a brand new kind of lie. They reach for the one that's worked before, on someone else, at some other time, and they run it back with the serial numbers filed off. I've been doing this for 9 years. I started as a claims processor at 22, moved to junior investigator at 25, and became a senior fraud analyst at 31. I'm not rich. I have a townhouse with a mortgage. I pay 2 weeks early every single month because the interest math works out better that way. A 401k I've never touched, and exactly one luxury. I get a coffee from the good place 3 blocks from my office instead of the break room machine. That's it. That's the whole indulgence. When you spend your 20s finding the hole in other people's stories, you get careful about your own. That Tuesday morning, I was at my desk reviewing a workers' comp claim. A warehouse employee who'd reported a back injury that, according to his own gym's check-in records, hadn't stopped him from deadlifting 3 times a week, when my phone buzzed on the desk beside my keyboard. I glanced down and felt something go cold and tight behind my sternum, the way it does right before you find the number that doesn't reconcile. A text from my mother. First one in 14 months. "Marissa, honey, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We'd love to have you over for dinner Friday. Just a small thing, us, you, Jordan, and Paige. A fresh start. Jordan is my younger brother. Paige is his fiancée. 4 names. A small dinner." 14 months earlier, my father had told me that if I wouldn't help this family, I could consider myself outside of it. He said it in the driveway of the house I grew up in, arms crossed, while my mother stood in the doorway not saying anything, which was its own kind of saying something. Here's what led to that driveway. 2 years before the text, my brother Jordan decided he was going to open a boutique fitness studio. Not a gym, a studio, with an app and a specific breathing method he'd learned from a YouTube channel, and a business model that consisted almost entirely of the phrase, "There's nothing like this in the whole city." He was 28. He had never run a business, never managed a P&L, never signed a commercial lease. He needed $92,000 in startup capital, and the bank would give it to him, with a co-signer. That co-signer was supposed to be me. I asked to see his financials. He didn't have any, not really, a spreadsheet with optimistic membership projections, and a line item labeled miscellaneous that was 14% of his total budget. I asked about his lease terms. He got defensive. I asked what his break-even membership count was, and he looked at me like I'd asked him to solve for the mass of the sun. I said no. Not because I didn't love my brother. I did and still do. But I'd spent 9 years reading other people's disasters for a living, and I recognized the shape of this one from a mile away. I knew exactly what $92,000 of somebody else's debt looks like 18 months later, when the studio's Instagram account goes quiet and the equipment gets repossessed and the co-signer is the one fielding calls from collections at 9 at night. My mother called it a betrayal of the family. My father used the word selfish 4 times in one phone call. I counted because counting things under stress is apparently a professional hazard. And then came the driveway and the line about being outside the family, and then nothing. 14 months of nothing. No calls on my birthday. No response when I texted after my grandmother's memorial service to ask if anyone needed help with the arrangements. Silence with a very specific temperature to it. Not cold exactly, more like a room where the thermostat's just been switched off and nobody's home to notice yet. The studio, for the record, closed 9 months after it opened. I know because a mutual friend mentioned it in passing, the way you mention a fact you assume the other person already knows, and I had to pretend I did. So when that text came through, just a small thing, a fresh start, I felt the old reflex ignite behind my ribs before my brain had even finished parsing the words. The reflex that says, go, fix it, make it smooth again. I've had that reflex since I was maybe 14, when I started babysitting for the neighbors specifically so I could quietly cover my own school field trip fees instead of asking my parents, because asking always seemed to cost more than the trip was worth. I typed back, I'll be there. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to a spreadsheet about a man who'd faked a slip and fall, and I told myself my hands weren't shaking. They were. My coworker Priya, who sits in the cubicle across from mine and has heard exactly enough about my family to be dangerous, rolled her chair over about an hour later. You look like you found a claim that doesn't add up, she said. Worse. I found an invitation that doesn't add up. I told her about the text. She listened, arms crossed, the same posture she uses when she's about to flag a claim as suspicious. For people, she said slowly. Did they say where? Chop House. The expensive one downtown. Corbin and Vine. And this is the same family that hasn't spoken to you in over a year. Same family. Marissa. You investigate fraud for a living. If a claimant came to you with this story, no contact for 14 months, then out of nowhere, an invitation to an expensive dinner, worded very specifically as just the 4 of us, what would you flag? I didn't answer right away, because I already knew the answer, and saying it out loud would have made it real before I was ready for it to be real. I'd flag the specificity, I said finally. Nobody overspecifies a small detail like guest count unless the actual number is a problem they're managing in advance. There it is, Priya said, and wheeled her chair back to her own desk like she'd made her point and didn't need to make it twice. She had. I just wasn't ready to listen yet. Here's the part one want to be honest about because I think some of you will recognize it in yourselves. I didn't say yes because I believed my parents had changed. I didn't say yes expecting an apology. My mother has never once, in 34 years, said the word sorry to me without immediately following it with a but. I said yes because I missed something underneath all of it. Not the parents who'd cut me off in a driveway. The version of my mother who used to sit with me on the back steps after a bad day at school and tell me, completely deadpan, that the mailman was definitely a spy, just to make me laugh. That mother hadn't called me in 14 months either. But some nights I still heard her voice doing the mailman bit, unprompted, out of nowhere, and it undid something in my chest every single time. I wanted to know if that woman was still in there, or if the silence had just been a longer, quieter version of the same transaction we'd always had. The one where I show up, I listen, and eventually I pay. I set myself one rule. I typed it into the Notes app on my phone the morning of because I know myself, and I know that under enough social pressure, I will absolutely talk myself out of a boundary I set 48 hours earlier. One dinner. Civil. No money changes hands. If it feels like a setup, I leave before the check. I read that note 4 times before I even started the car. The drive to Corbin and Vine takes about 35 minutes from my place, most of it highway. I didn't put music on. I've noticed. In 9 years of driving to depositions and site inspections for claims I already suspected were fraudulent, that silence helps me think more clearly than anything with a beat does. Somewhere around the exit ramp, my stomach did the thing it does before I walk into a building where I already know I'm going to find something I don't want to find. Investigators call it instinct. It's really just pattern recognition your body does faster than your conscious brain will admit to. I almost took the next exit and turned around.
I want to be honest about that too.
I got as far as flipping my blinker on before I turned it back off and kept driving because I was 34 years old, and I had spent 14 months rehearsing this exact moment of turning around, and I decided I would rather know than wonder. The restaurant sits at the end of a small plaza with a valet stand out front, the kind of place where the parking lot itself tells you the entrees start somewhere north of $40. I passed on the valet and found my own spot, and that's when the counting started. My father's truck. My mother's sedan next to it.
Fine.
That's 2. Then Jordan's car, with the parking permit sticker from his new apartment complex still on the windshield. 3. Then, a few spaces down, my Aunt Denise's minivan, which I recognized instantly because of the faded soccer decal on the back window from a team none of her kids had played on in a decade. Then my Uncle Ray's truck. Then a car I recognized as belonging to my cousin Brandon, complete with the parking pass from the community college where he was, last I heard, failing out of an associate's degree in something undeclared. I sat in my car with the engine off for close to 2 full minutes, both hands on the wheel, rereading the note on my phone.
Just a small thing.
Us, you, Jordan, and Paige. I counted 11 vehicles I recognized and 3 I didn't. The smart move, the move any competent investigator would tell a claimant to make, was to reverse out of that lot and drive the 35 minutes home and never think about it again. Instead, I got out, straightened my blazer, and walked toward the entrance because I was 34 years old and I had decided a long time ago that I was done letting a parking lot scare me out of a room. The hostess found my name on her screen before I'd even finished saying it. "Right this way. Your party's already seated," she said, in the particular clipped tone of someone who has been managing a large, demanding table for the better part of an hour and is holding her professionalism together with visible effort. I know that tone. I hear it in customer service reps' voices on recorded claim calls all the time, right before something goes wrong. She led me toward a private dining room at the back, and I heard the table before I saw it. Laughter, the clink of glasses, my Aunt Denise's laugh, which carries the way a fire alarm carries. Then I turned the corner, and I saw the table. 19 place settings. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, a low arrangement of candles running down the center. And food, more food than I'd ever seen ordered by a party that small anywhere outside of a wedding. A 3-tiered seafood tower, stacked with lobster tails and king crab legs on crushed ice, glistening under the low light. 3 separate platters of what I'd later learn were whole broiled lobsters, split and buttered, arranged like they'd been styled for a photo shoot. 2 magnums of champagne in silver buckets, one already down to its last inch. A charcuterie spread the size of a coffee table. I would find out later, when I finally saw an itemized copy of that check, that the seafood alone had run just over $4,000, not counting the champagne, the sides, or the desserts that hadn't even arrived yet. The one chair still empty sat at the far end, directly across from my father. My mother spotted me first. She stood up with both arms open, and every single head at that table turned in the same motion, like a school of fish changing direction. "Marissa, sweetheart, look at you." Actual applause followed, a few claps, a whistle from Uncle Ray, my Aunt Denise dabbing at her eyes with a cloth napkin like I was a soldier coming home rather than the daughter they'd frozen out for 14 months over a loan I never agreed to co-sign. I sat down because that's what you do when the chair is already pulled out and a server is already filling your water glass before your purse has hit the floor. I smiled because 15 years of sitting across conference tables from people who are lying to me has taught me exactly one universally useful skill: how to smile while your brain runs a full threat assessment underneath it. "I thought it was going to be just the 4 of us," I said, keeping my voice light. My mother waved a hand, the same gesture she uses to dismiss a fly. "Well, once Denise heard, and then Ray, and then your cousin Brandon, you know how family gets. It just grew." I knew exactly how family gets. I'd been the one funding its growth for as long as I could remember. I scanned the table while my mother refilled my water, without asking. My father sat at the head, carving into a lobster tail like it owed him money. Jordan sat 2 seats down, arm around Paige, scrolling something on his phone with the specific posture of a man who has decided this dinner requires none of his attention. Aunt Denise and Uncle Ray anchored the middle of the table, working through what looked like their second round of champagne. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a funeral filled out the rest. Brandon, his younger sister Kayla, 2 family friends I didn't recognize at all, apparently enjoying king crab legs on whatever occasion this actually was. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand.
See?
This is what we do. We take care of each other. There it was. The phrase I'd heard my entire life, deployed at every single moment someone needed my checkbook. She'd said it when I was 19 and she needed help covering the electric bill. She'd said it when Jordan needed a co-signer for his car at 23. She said it again now, over $4,000 of shellfish, like a magic word that had never once, in 34 years, applied in the other direction. I squeezed back and said nothing. I was too busy counting plates. My father waved the server over, a young man, maybe 20, moving with the careful speed of someone managing a table too large and too demanding for one person to handle alone. His name tag read Owen. My father didn't look at a menu before he ordered. Another round of the Lobster Tower, and let's get another bottle of the Cristal going. We're celebrating tonight. He said, Cristal, the way you say a word you've been waiting all night to say out loud in front of an audience, and he pulled his credit card from his wallet and held it up between two fingers like a magician about to perform a trick before setting it back down on the table without handing it over. A prop, not a payment. I watched him tuck it away with a small pat, the way you pat a dog for performing correctly, and something in me went very still and very focused, the exact feeling I get at my desk when a claims number stops matching its story. I know my father. I've watched him argue with a mechanic over an $11 diagnostic fee. I've watched him return a shirt because the sale tag had fallen off in the wash and he refused to pay full price on principle. This man does not casually order $200 champagne without checking a price. This was a performance, and it was aimed directly at me. Look how well we're doing. Look how little we need you. Except his truck in the parking lot still had the same crack across the taillight it's had for 3 years. And my mother's handbag, sitting on the chair beside her, had a strap held together with a safety pin she was clearly hoping nobody would notice. They were performing solvency. I just didn't know yet what the ticket price was going to be. The small cut started somewhere around the second bottle. Aunt Denise leaned across Uncle Ray and said, laughing in the specific way people laugh when they want you to know they're actually serious, must be nice, jetting around auditing rich people's insurance claims while the rest of us are clipping coupons. I don't audit rich people's claims. I audit fraud, which cuts across every income bracket equally. I didn't correct her. Cousin Kayla asked, not unkindly but not carefully either, if I ever felt guilty living so comfortably while the family had been going through a rough patch. I hadn't heard about a rough patch. Nobody had told me there was a rough patch. Jordan, without looking up from his phone, added, she wouldn't know. She hasn't exactly been around. Each comment landed with the rhythm of something rehearsed without being scripted, the way a choir finds the same note without a conductor standing in front of them. They had clearly been discussing me, my absence, my income, my supposed abundance, long before I ever walked through that door, and they'd arrived tonight already agreeing on the plot. Marissa left. Marissa has plenty. Marissa owes. Aunt Denise delivered what I'd later think of as the evening's thesis statement. She reached over, took my hand the way you'd take someone's hand at a funeral, and said, family doesn't keep score, sweetheart. This from a woman who once didn't speak to her own daughter-in-law for 4 months over where she'd been seated at a Christmas dinner. I didn't laugh. I just picked up my water glass and took a slow sip because it was the only thing on that table I'd actually ordered myself. Around the 40-minute mark, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed 2 minutes without Aunt Denise's running commentary and a door I could lock. The restroom at Corbin and Vine has the kind of lighting that makes you look slightly better than you feel, which was doing a lot of heavy lifting that night because I felt like I was digesting broken glass. That's when I saw it. A tablet, propped on the marble counter beside the sink, screen still lit, in a case with a cracked corner I recognized immediately. Paige's tablet. She must have brought it in to take photos and set it down mid-scroll. I want to be clear that I didn't go looking. But the screen was bright and the notification banner sitting at the top was from a group chat, and the preview text stopped my hand mid-reach for a paper towel. The chat was called Dinner Plan. 3 participants. Mom, Dad, Jordan. The most recent message, sent 4 days earlier, was from my mother. The preview line read, don't let her know the guest list until she's already seated. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. My pulse didn't spike. It went quiet and precise, the way it does at my desk when a number finally lines up with a story I already suspected. I picked the tablet up the way I'd pick up an invoice that doesn't add up, not with anger, just confirmation of something I already knew in my gut. I scrolled up. The full message read, "Don't let her know the guest list until she's already seated. Once everyone's there watching, she won't make a scene. She never could handle an audience." Below it, my father, "Just make sure she sits across from me. I'll handle the ask." Jordan's reply, 2 minutes later, "Order the good stuff before she gets there, lol. Once it's on the table, she can't exactly send it back." I scrolled further. 3 weeks of planning. My mother coordinating who is coming. Denise is in, Ray's in, Brandon says yes if there's an open bar. My father, terser, mostly logistics, table size, timing, how to phrase the invitation so it sounded casual and small. Then the messages that turned my stomach cold. My mother, 11 days earlier. "The bank called again about the house. We need to figure something out before the next payment is due." My father, the same day. "Marissa can cover us for a while. She makes more than she needs." And then, 8 days out, the line that landed like a dropped shelf. "It's not asking for a handout. It's letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her the chance." Grateful. They wanted me grateful for the privilege of being ambushed into paying a check I didn't order, for a financial emergency nobody had bothered to actually tell me about, by the same family that had frozen me out completely the last time I said no. I set the tablet back down exactly where I'd found it, screen still lit, and I washed my hands. I looked at myself in that flattering mirror and thought, quite calmly, I know exactly what this is. And for the first time in my life, I am not going to pay it. I want to tell you the strangest part of standing in that bathroom, holding the truth in both hands, was how calm I felt. Not numb. Not furious. Just clear, the specific, clean-edged clarity I get right before I present findings on a fraud case that's finally airtight. Every piece finally in the same column. Stay with me because what I did next, I planned in the time it took to dry my hands. I walked back to the table, wearing the exact expression I use when a claimant tries to explain away a discrepancy to my face. Pleasant, unreadable, fully paying attention. Nobody noticed anything different. Aunt Denise was mid-story about a neighbor's fence dispute. Uncle Ray was working through his second lobster tail. Paige had reclaimed her tablet from the restroom and gone back to scrolling, oblivious. But I noticed things now that I hadn't let myself see before. My mother kept glancing at my father's credit card sitting on the table, quick little flicks of her eyes, the way you check a countdown clock. My father's laugh was half a beat too loud every time, the specific volume people use to cover nerves. The second bottle of champagne was nearly empty, and nobody had suggested slowing down, because they weren't the ones paying. I was. That was the entire architecture of the evening. Every lobster tail, every champagne pour, was another brick in a wall being built around me, high enough that I couldn't leave without causing the exact scene I'd spent my whole life avoiding. So I started asking questions. Casual ones, the kind you ask when you're catching up after 14 months, not the kind you ask when you already know the answers and you're watching people improvise around them. "How's the studio going, Jordan?" His scrolling thumb paused. "We closed. Market wasn't really there for it." "That's too bad. How long did it run?" 9 months. My mother jumped in before the silence could settle. "Jordan's exploring some really exciting new options right now. He's got so much talent." I nodded and turned to my father. "How's the business, Dad?" "Still doing the commercial contracts." His jaw tightened, a tell I've been cataloging since before I was old enough to drive. "Between projects at the moment. Economy's been rough. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I'd read the bank called again about the house on his future daughter-in-law's tablet 9 minutes earlier. I kept nodding and let them keep talking, because people tell you everything once they've decided you're the one holding the checkbook. They told me about the kitchen renovation they'd quietly shelved, about skipping the family trip this year, about things being a little tight, but nothing we can't handle. Every sentence was a window into a house that was quietly on fire, while everyone stood on the lawn insisting the smoke was just the grill. Cousin Kayla, genuinely trying to make conversation rather than corner me, was the one who accidentally cracked it wide open. She was the only relative who'd texted me a birthday message during the 14 months of silence, a short thinking of you I'd never replied to and still felt a small, specific guilt about. So, Marissa, your mom said you got promoted or something. Investigating claims? Senior fraud analyst, I said. I lead a team now. We handle everything from workers' comp to major property claims. That's amazing. So, you're the one who decides if people get paid or not. I'm the one who finds out whether the story matches the numbers, I said, plainly, the way I'd say it in a deposition. If it doesn't, the payout gets denied. If it does, it clears. The word denied landed on that table like a dropped plate. Aunt Denise's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Uncle Ray looked up from his lobster for the first time in 10 minutes. Jordan's scrolling thumb froze mid-swipe. Even my father shifted in his seat, visibly recalculating. They already knew I was successful. They'd built the entire evening around the assumption that I was successful enough to cover a $4,000 dinner without blinking. But hearing the actual shape of what I did, the authority in it, the specificity, was different from simply assuming it. They'd pictured a well-paid claims clerk who'd gotten lucky. They hadn't pictured someone who spends her workdays finding exactly where a story stops holding up and who now knew, in granular detail, the difference between what this family was telling me and what they were telling each other. The table recalibrated. I felt it happen, like a change in air pressure before a storm. The power hadn't shifted yet, but it had loosened at the joints. My father waited until dessert. He was strategic about it. I'll give him that much credit. The tower of empty lobster shells had been cleared. The creme brulees had arrived and been cracked open, and the table had settled into that warm, slow satisfaction that comes specifically from a meal somebody else is paying for. He set down his fork and folded his hands on the table's edge, a gesture I'd watched him make before signing contracts, before Thanksgiving toasts, before asking me at 23 to co-sign a loan, just this once. He looked at me, not unkindly, not cruelly, with the specific expression of a man who genuinely believes he's being reasonable. Marissa, he said, smiling, you're paying, right? You've always been good for it. 5 words did the real damage. You've always been good for it. Not a request. A settled fact, spoken in front of 19 people, the way you'd state something everyone in the room already understood. I didn't answer right away. I've learned that silence does more work than words in a room full of people who are used to being agreed with. 3 seconds. Then 5. The kind of silence that makes a table full of people shift in their chairs and suddenly find something fascinating to look at on the wall behind you. I didn't answer him with words yet. I stood up, calmly, the way you stand when a decision's already been made and you don't need the room's permission to act on it, and I said, let me go take care of a few things, and walked toward the back of the dining room. I found the floor manager near the service station, a man in his 40s with an earpiece and the unhurried confidence of someone who has handled every category of chaos a dining room can produce. His name tag read David. Owen, our server, was beside him organizing check presenters. I kept my voice low. Not dramatic. Just the volume you use when you're handling something that doesn't need an audience. Excuse me, David, is it? I have 2 requests. First, I'm not the host of that party, and I won't be covering the table. When the check is presented, please bring the full amount to the gentleman at the head of the table. He's the one whose card is already on file for the reservation. David glanced at Owen, then back at me. And the second? Split off just my seat, 1 glass of water, nothing else, onto its own check, and put 25% on top for your team. You've all earned it tonight. Owen's eyes widened slightly. David studied me for a beat, reading the situation the way a good floor manager reads every situation, quickly, without judgment. Understood, he said. I'll present it once dessert clears. Give it about 10 minutes. I thanked him, paid my own check on the spot, and walked back to the table. I sat down, picked up my water glass, and waited with everyone else. Those 10 minutes were the calmest part of my entire night. Aunt Denise complained about the price of mulch. Uncle Ray told a fishing story with no clear ending. Paige took a selfie with the dessert wreckage. My mother laughed at something Kayla said, a real laugh, the kind that crinkled her eyes and, for exactly 3 seconds, Sounded like the woman who used to do the mailman is a spy bit on the back steps. I almost felt something soften. Almost. Then I looked at my father, checking his phone under the table with the tight-jawed focus of a man waiting on a message he didn't want, and I remembered the line from that group chat. She makes more than she needs. Owen appeared at the edge of the room, and I knew exactly whose seat he was walking toward before he took his first step. He set the leather check presenter down directly in front of my father. Not the center of the table. Not near me. Directly in front of the man who'd made the reservation, whose card had supposedly been on file for 2 hours, who had told the whole table 2 hours earlier to put it all on this. We're celebrating. Conversation died like a candle in a draft. My father stared at the folio for 2 full seconds. I could watch him process it. The check was supposed to go to Marissa. The check is in front of me. My mother's eyes went wide. She looked at me, then at the folio, then back at me, and for the first time that entire night, her composure cracked enough to show the math running underneath it. Marissa, she started. My father recovered faster. He always does. 61 years, and he's never once admitted to being caught off guard. He opened the folio with a casual flick and did not look at the total, because if he looked at the total in front of 19 people, the performance would end right there. I've got it, he said, pulling a card from his wallet with the same 2-finger flourish he'd used 2 hours earlier. We're celebrating, remember? He handed the card to Owen without breaking eye contact with me. Owen said, gently, I'll be right back, sir, in the tone you use when you already know what's coming and the person you're speaking to doesn't. My father leaned back, arms crossed, smiling at me with the full confidence of a man who believes his card is about to save him. Owen came back in 4 minutes. He leaned down and said, at a volume meant to be discreet, but landing on a table gone silent enough to hear ice melt, I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined. Nobody moved. My father's smile held for 1 more second, a reflex, like a light staying on after you flipped the switch, and then it went out entirely. Run it again, he said. Owen disappeared and came back 2 minutes later. Same gentle voice. I'm sorry, sir. It's still not going through. Would you like to try a different card? My father's fingers moved through his wallet. 1 card, then another, then a third pulled from behind his driver's license like a last round he'd forgotten was even loaded. He handed it over. The table stayed silent. 19 people, no forks moving, no glasses being refilled, just the sound of my father's pride compressing into a leather wallet he couldn't close fast enough. Owen came back a 3rd time. He didn't need to say anything. His expression said it for him. My father looked at Owen. Then he looked at me, not with anger yet, with something raw, the unguarded look of a man realizing in front of everyone he loves that the safety net he'd been counting on had a hole cut clean through the middle of it. He looked at me the way you look at a lifeboat pulling away from the ship. I picked up my water, took a slow sip, and set it back down. I don't owe you, I said. I never did. His chair scraped back against the hardwood with a sound like tearing paper. Marissa. His voice was low, controlled, shaking right at the edges. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Dad. Your card was declined. That's a conversation for you and your bank. You were supposed to. He stopped himself, but not fast enough. The sentence hung there unfinished and completely visible to every single person at that table. You were supposed to pay. My mother started crying, the loud kind, with gasps and dabbing, the kind pitched to recruit sympathy from the tables around us. After everything we've done for you, after I carried you, what have you done for me, Mom? In the last 14 months. My voice stayed level. I didn't raise it. I didn't lean forward. I kept both hands wrapped around my water glass. Tell me, in front of everyone, what did you actually do? Jordan slammed a hand flat on the table. God, this is so typical. You always have to make everything about you. Aunt Denise reached for my arm. Marissa, dear, your father is clearly embarrassed. Can't you just?
No.
1 word. I said it the way I say it to a claimant who's tried to shave a suspicious number off an invoice. Clear, final, no apology attached. Then my father broke, not with anger this time, with something worse. His voice dropped, and for one honest, Terrible second, he sounded like a man standing in a house with the power shut off. Marissa, please. We're drowning.
I saw him.
I actually saw him. The scared man underneath the performance. The father who'd lost his business and his footing and couldn't say it out loud until a declined card said it for him. I felt something in my chest genuinely ache for him. Then he added, "And you'd let us?" The ache stopped instantly, because even drowning, he was still reaching for my wallet instead of my hand. I stood up.
Not fast.
Not dramatic. The way you stand when the decision's already made, and you don't need the room's permission to leave.
Dad.
I'm genuinely sorry you're struggling.
I mean that.
I gestured at the wreckage on the table. The empty champagne magnums, the cracked open dessert dishes, 19 faces watching me like I was the villain in a script they'd rehearsed for 3 weeks. But this isn't asking for help. This is a setup. You didn't invite me here to reconnect. You invited me here to collect. My mother's crying turned harder. That's not fair, Marissa. We just wanted you back. You wanted me back for what I could cover, Mom. I saw the messages. She makes more than she needs. The table went white. Jordan's face drained. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stared at the tablecloth. If you need real help, I said, I will sit down with you and an actual financial counselor, and we'll build a real plan. No tricks. No audience. No lobster tower. But I am not paying this bill. I didn't order it. Nobody told me it existed until I was already sitting in front of it. And I don't owe it to you. I never did. Nobody spoke. I picked up my purse and looked at my mother one last time. You've told me my whole life that family takes care of family. So why was I always the only one who actually did? Then I walked toward the door, past the hostess stand, past the valet, out through the front doors into the parking lot. Owen caught me near the coat check, holding my receipt. Thank you, he said, quiet, genuine. I touched his arm. You handle that whole room tonight. You're going to be great at whatever you do next. He looked briefly startled that a customer had said something like that to him at all, then nodded and went back inside. The parking lot was quiet. A Thursday evening, warm air, the kind of stillness that feels almost rude after the noise you just walked out of. I sat in my car with the windows down and reread the note on my phone one more time. One dinner. Civil, no money changes hands. If it feels like a setup, I leave before the check. I'd kept every part of that promise except the civil part, and honestly, I've made peace with that. I opened the family group chat before I started the engine. Messages were already flooding in, my mother, Aunt Denise, Jordan, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all typing at once, a cascade of capital letters and accusations, the specific fury of people who've just been caught rather than people who are actually sorry. I didn't read a single one. I scrolled to the bottom, tapped Leave Group, and watched the little confirmation appear. Marissa has left the chat. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat, started the car, and drove home in the same silence I'd driven there in. Except this time, the silence wasn't nervous. It was mine. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. Nobody called that night, or the next day, or the week after. The group chat continued without me. I know because Kayla, the cousin who'd texted me during the silence, reached out separately about 10 days later. I just wanted you to know, she wrote. That was the most honest thing anyone's done at a family dinner in as long as I can remember. I'm sorry I was part of it. She was the only one who apologized. 3 weeks after that, Jordan texted, not to apologize, but to ask if I could front the deposit on a new apartment. I replied with the name of a nonprofit credit counseling service and wished him well. He didn't respond. Through Kayla, I learned the rest in fragments over the following months. My father's contracting business had actually folded almost a year before that dinner. 2 commercial projects that went sideways on cost overruns he'd personally guaranteed. My mother had been covering the gap with a home equity line that was now maxed out. The house went up for sale in the fall. They moved into a smaller rental 2 towns over. Jordan took a job doing sales for a mattress showroom. None of it was what I would have wanted for any of them. All of it was the direct result of choices made long before I ever sat down at that table, and none of it was mine to absorb. I kept the one promise I'd made out loud that night. I call my father about 6 weeks later and offered, again, to sit down with him and an actual financial counselor. No audience, no theater, just numbers and a plan.
He hung up on me.
I haven't called again, but the offer still stands, and it will keep standing whether or not anyone ever takes me up on it. What I learned, doing a job where I spend every day finding the place where somebody's story stops matching the truth, is that the most expensive thing you can ever buy is other people's comfort with your silence. Every check I picked up for 14 years bought exactly one thing: the appearance of peace. It never once bought an actual apology, or an actual change, or an actual seat at that table that didn't come with a price attached. The night I finally stopped paying for it was the night I actually got something worth having. That's my story. 19 place settings, 1 glass of water, and a declined credit card that told the truth nobody else at that table was willing to say out loud. If you've ever been the family bank, hear this. Helping is a choice, not a debt owed in advance. And a boundary doesn't have to be loud to be permanent. If this one hit home, share it with someone who needs to read it tonight. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done differently. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.